Hey Katie, this is Mrs. Kohl and I am coming to you from my son's bedroom. I'm going to introduce you to Ethan Kohl today, and he is going to introduce us to the parts of a computer. He's taken his own computer and built it himself from the ground up, and so he knows all the pieces that are inside. He's going to show them to us, and so we're going to kind of just spend a little time with him and learn the parts of the computer today.
This is your regular desktop computer. Now this is a gaming PC, so it's got a few more odds and ends than most other computers do, but it has all the basics. So, getting it apart, just looking at the inside, we're going to go straight to the heart and core of the system. Right here we have the CPU fan, which cools the heart and core of the system, called the CPU. That stands for the Central Processing Unit. It's what does all the work for your entire computer. It sits on the center of the motherboard, which has all this stuff on it, which we'll get to. But the motherboard takes the CPU power and acts kind of like the nervous system of your body and goes out, sends all the information out, and brings it all back in. So the CPU, which is really the brain of the PC, can do all of its work. Now, getting into it, to the immediate right of the CPU fan, which has to cool the CPU down to make sure it doesn't overheat and burn itself up, is what we call RAM. RAM stands for Random Access Memory. That's what all of your Chrome, all of your stuff when you boot up your PC works off of. If it's anything that's just like a short task that really needs to be done quickly, it all gets stored on RAM, and then once your system shuts down for the day, everything on the RAM just gets wiped off and you get a brand new slate. Underneath that, we have what's called the GPU. Now this is a very beefy unit. GPU makes your monitor, makes all the colors on your monitor, makes everything work, and so you can see it. Without a GPU, you would have very, very low graphics. You would not be able to really watch anything. It wouldn't be the computer that we think of today without a GPU. Now, going on to the back side of the computer. This all needs to get powered somehow, and that is powered by our power supply right here, which runs all the power all the way through everything onto the other side. Without this, nothing would turn on, nothing would start. Now, a couple additional things we have is this entire thing gets hot really quickly. So what we have to have some cooling fans pulling air from the outside, running it through so it has nice, fresh, cool air through, and then exhaust it out the outside. So it comes in through here. This takes some of that cool air, cools down your CPU, and then as soon as that hot air gets out, it gets pulled out through right here and through these top fans up here.
Okay, and so most computers would have to have a fan of some kind, or what would happen?
The CPU would continually heat up and heat up and heat up until it got so hot it actually would burn the components that make up its own CPU, and essentially would fry itself.
And so that's why in our computer room some days it gets kind of hot in there, because the computers are making so much heat that that the fans are getting that out of there, and sometimes we have to turn the air on in the middle of the winter.
So that is your basic desktop for your regular computer at home. Now, in addition to that, this doesn't really do much on its own. We can't really just play on this, play a game, open up Chrome or whatever internet browser you want to use. We actually have to have what's commonly referred to as peripherals. Those are the things you use to actually utilize the computer. So over here we have your basic peripherals. You have your monitor right here. Most of the time it's flat. It can be vertical or horizontal, but it's just what's displaying so you can actually interact with your computer. We have your regular keyboard right here. This is a little bit more of a fancy one than what you're used to, but it has your regular keys, your 10 key, your F keys, all of those. Then you have your mouse, headphones, and I have a gaming pad over here, but that's not something you're going to find almost anywhere. Now, this is your regular desktop setup. Now, if you're on the go, you have something called a laptop. Now, a laptop has everything you see right here except for two major things. It doesn't have all the space that this computer does right here. It has it all compacted down. It has all these components just put all in this tiny little chassis right here. And it does not have a GPU. And the reason for that is because it already has a GPU incorporated into its onboard CPU. They just put it right in there with the brain, so it works just fine. Some laptops do have a GPU, but those are really expensive and not very common. This also has its monitor built in, as well as a mouse pad instead of your regular mouse, and then it has the keyboard already built in. Now, how do we have all of this right here in that? Because this is a whole lot more volume, whole lot more room than that is. And that's because they've shrunk everything down into that one little area. And as we talked about heat earlier, this gets hot really, really fast. So it can't do the regular cooling that this computer does. So in order to actually cool itself down, they've taken different CPUs that don't heat up as fast and can't do as much work as this can and put it into your regular laptops. Now, different companies put different levels of CPUs in there and try different cooling methods, but most of the time they have to turbo it down so it's actually usable.
Okay, so Ethan, you put together this computer on your own. You bought the parts individually and had them all shipped here. If someone wanted to do that and build their own computer from the ground up, what would you recommend that they do?
You're going to spend a lot of time on research. If you know someone that's built a computer before, I would recommend asking them. It is not something that you want to do on your own unless you've done a lot of research. I think I did 3 years of off and on just looking at PCs, trying to understand what I was doing, looking at different things, just learning. I spent 3 years just going on the internet occasionally and looking at PC parts before I even bought my parts. Once I bought it, it's pretty easy to assemble. You can literally just Google a tutorial, but you need to understand what you're putting together, because if you don't, you're likely to damage it, and it's not cheap to fix.
So what does it cost to build a computer? If I wanted to build just a regular grade computer without some of the fancy stuff that you have in yours, what would it cost to build my own computer?
To build your own computer, realistically, $500. That's if you're doing pretty bare minimum stuff. You can find computers cheaper than that, but at that point, it's actually better to just buy a pre-built one. You're not going to save any money. A lot of the reason people build their own computers is because they actually save money building it. I probably saved $400 or $500 building this myself, finding the parts, deciding what I was going to do, and deciding what system was best for me. There's a lot of research that needs to go into deciding, well, is this part going to work better for me, or is that part going to work better for me?
And so what were your needs for your computer to decide what parts you wanted?
My needs for my computer was I do a lot of video gaming, so I needed a good GPU. I needed a good CPU. I wanted to get a really, really good CPU so I could actually just keep the CPU and the motherboard together and then upgrade my parts with that and not have to worry about what we call bottlenecks, which is where one part's so powerful that another part can't fully take full advantage of it. So if you have a really, really powerful GPU, but your CPU can't process all the information that's coming from it, you're wasting money, you're wasting time, because it's not going to be able to utilize all the resources at its disposal. Now, one thing I forgot about and want to show you is what's called the hard drive.
Ah, the hard drive.
Now, this is the memory of the system. We talked about RAM earlier, which is random access memory, the quick stuff, the snappy stuff that gets erased. But if you want to save something on your system, we have what are called hard drives. Now, I'll grab a hard drive real quick out of here, and I'll show you. This is a hard drive. It actually is a physical disk that gets written and rewritten whenever you want to actually download something onto your computer. So all your Word files, downloading your internet browser, downloading anything at all. Now, Google has something different. Google has what's a cloud-based system. So essentially everything that you work on is actually on, believe it or not, a PC like this. But we don't call them a PC. We call them a server. What a server does, it has all the parts you just saw here, but it's in a very small, compact area, and there's hundreds and thousands of them called server farms or server banks. That stores all your data for you, and you just use the internet to access it wirelessly. The problem with that is, if it's wirelessly, if you for some reason lose internet, lose access to Wi-Fi or data, you can't have access to it. So that's why we have this thing called a hard drive. Whenever you want to access something, like I have all my games on my hard drive, and I don't want to have to worry about my internet being slow. I just download it on my PC, download it on here, and I can access it whenever I want.
So Ethan, we would like to thank you for taking time with us today.
For the rest of my students, know that underneath this video, I'm going to place a
PowerPoint document that you can go through, and it'll have some of the basic components he talked about today. It probably won't have everything he talked about today. Kind of just trying to learn those vocabulary words that we use in class to talk about a computer. And so you can go through that and check out the parts of the computer. Thanks, and have a great day, guys.